Sunland. Very much for sharing those developments with us. Joining us now is Independent Senator Angus King of Maine. He serves on the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Armed Services Committee. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Allison.
What are you listening for tonight in President Trump's address before Congress?
Well, I think what I'd like to see, and obviously you've been talking about specifics and optimism, I think I'd like to see the president acknowledge that there's a whole half of the country that didn't vote for him, and that it's time to start bringing people together. It's time to start enunciating a positive vision, because there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of people really concerned about the direction of the administration, and I'd like to see a little bridge building tonight. I think it's a great opportunity for him to do that, and then of course all the other things your commentators have been talking about, some optimism, some specifics about programs. But to me, the big opportunity, and you guys have been using the word reset, this is an opportunity to reset in a positive and more inclusive direction, because we just can't keep running as really two separate countries here.
Yeah, this is a big moment, and this is certainly a chance for President Trump to lay out a different vision than what we've seen so far. He's also going to give some specifics, as we understand it, certainly about his budget. So let me put some of those up for our viewers. Here are the things that the places he plans to increase in the budget. So defense spending, a boost of $54 billion. He'd like to spend more money on law enforcement. He's said he'd like to spend more money on infrastructure. Here are some of the things that he plans to cut. Foreign aid to other countries, in other words, the State Department budget. We know that he's not a huge fan of the Environmental Protection Agency. He plans to cut some of their budget, and other non-defense federal agencies. Will Congress go along with a budget like that, Senator?
Well, I think you got to put it in context. The president proposes, the Congress disposes, and there's always a negotiation. And I think this should be viewed as a kind of opening bid. By the way, the $54 billion, actually, it's about an $18 billion increase over the last budget that Barack Obama submitted. So as John McCain pointed out, it's really not a gigantic increase in defense. It's significant. The thing that bothers me a little, and I'm not surprised by it, is you're talking about $54 billion in cuts other places. Very unspecified. I can tell you from dealing with budgets, it's easy to talk about generalities. When you get into the specifics, it's hard. The thing about foreign aid, I talk to my constituents, they say cut foreign aid. Everybody has the impression it's a great big number. It's about, I think, 1% of the budget. It's a relatively small number, and as James Mattis once said, if you don't do foreign aid, you got to buy me more ammunition, because it's a lot cheaper to prevent a war than it is to fight a war. So, we'll have to see how that goes. You're going to have Lindsey Graham on CNN tomorrow night. He's a big advocate of both the military and the State Department, what's called soft power, because a lot can be done to prevent confrontations through diplomatic means. So, we'll see what the actual numbers are. The EPA, when you talk about cutting the EPA, a lot of EPA money goes to the states. So you could be talking about simply shifting expenses from the federal government to the states when you're talking about severely cutting the EPA.
Well, President Trump just sat down with our friends over at Fox, and he spelled out how the math is going to work in his mind. So let me play this for you, Senator.
Sure.
If you cut all the money from EPA and all the money from state, that's about $50 billion.
Well, I think the money's going to come from a revved up economy. I mean, you look at the kind of numbers we're doing, we were probably GDP of a little more than 1%. And if I can get that up to 3 or maybe more, we have a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different ballgame. And that's what we're looking to do.
Senator, what do you think of that explanation? If he can get the GDP up to 3%, then the money flows in.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true, but there's no causal connection necessarily between what he's proposing to do and increases in the GDP. Increasing defense spending, for example, isn't going to increase GDP. There's always growth is one of the important ways to get out of this. The question is, are the policies being enunciated going to contribute to economic growth? And I think the president's going to find that moving that GDP growth upward is a lot harder than it sounds. What we have to be careful with is what George H.W. Bush 30 years ago called voodoo economics, which is just cut taxes, everything's going to be great, the economy's going to grow, and it'll pay for itself. That has never proven to work. And so I think we just need to be careful. I want to see the numbers work, not a promise of, well, maybe growth is going to make it pay off a couple of years from now.
Yeah.
So that's the way to analyze that particular way of approaching this.
Senator, I want to ask you about the investigations that are going on in Congress into the alleged ties between Team Trump and Russia. You are on the Select Committee on Intelligence, and I want to ask you about your chairman, Richard Burr, whether or not you believe, given what he's said publicly, whether he is capable of doing a fair and independent, thorough investigation into whether or not these ties existed between the Trump campaign and Russia.
Well, as you know, he apparently took a call from the White House and interceded with some media people last week, at the end of last week. And I'm really disturbed by that. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it personally, so I don't really know all the facts and the circumstances, so I'm going to be reluctant to categorically judge. But it did really concern me. Now, I've talked to several Republican members of the committee, several Democratic members of the committee, and I believe that there is a bipartisan consensus that we've got to do this straight up, we've got to do it fairly, we've got to do it effectively, and it's got to be thorough, and it's got to be credible. I'm concerned about what Chairman Burr did. I don't think it was appropriate based on what I know now, but I believe the committee, and by the way, the committee is very carefully balanced. It's eight Republicans, 6 Democrats, and me, so if there's a one-vote swing, so the chairman can't really control it, and I know, as I say, I talked to 2 or 3 Republicans yesterday. They're absolutely committed. I talked to Marco Rubio. He said, I'm not going to be part of a whitewash, and I'm not going to be part of a witch hunt, and I thought that was a pretty good way to put it.
Okay, Senator Angus King, thank you very much for joining us on New Day.
Thank you.